Welcome back to my channel True Crime and Trials, where I discuss true crime and trials. My name's Lindsay, and next on the Bob Durst trial witness list is Dr. Albert Cooperman. This is another video testimony, and I think we all know by now who this is, and he's the dean, one of the deans from the medical school that Kathy went to, and he's worked at that medical school for about 40 years, and he was the Dean of Education. He is asked if, as the Dean of Education, what his daily interactions with the students would be. And he says students would come to him to discuss their career interests and ask him advice about that in terms of how they could prepare for it effectively. But mainly students would come to him to discuss special programs which they offer beyond the required clerkship in community-based programs. He also says that occasionally there might be some specific problem that a student has that they want to discuss, but usually that's more for the Dean of Students. If any student called him with any problem, he would tell them to call the Dean of Students. The Dean of Students would have more interactions with an individual student. Albert just didn't have the time to have one-to-ones with students. And the Dean of Students was, of course, Jean Cook. Okay, on to Kathy. He is asked what his impression was of her, and based on talking to her twice in a very informal setting, she struck him as a very bright and attractive woman and seemed to look very good in terms of her dress. She was very smart looking. Those two interactions were maybe 5 or 10 minutes long. Kathy never went to him for careers advice, nor went to him to speak about the course that she took that he instructed. He says over the 4 years that Kathy was in medical school, he probably interacted with Kathy for a total of 15 minutes, although he stated 10 minutes earlier. So 10 to 15 minutes, and he's reasonably certain about that. Either way, it wasn't very long over those 4 years. He did become aware at some point that Kathy was married to Bob Durst. He didn't know Bob, and he had never spoke to him. He had no personal knowledge of Kathy's personal life or problems she had. So basically, he didn't have a close relationship with Kathy. He is aware towards the end of Kathy's medical school career that she was having some absences, and he was concerned about it. He says that in her last clerkship before she disappeared, she was doing quite well and she passed. Before Kathy disappeared, she was doing very well. So another, they keep reiterating the fact that she was doing extremely well, even though she was absent a lot of the time. Well, not a lot of the time. She had quite a few absences, but she still kept up with everything and she managed to pass it. There was only one of them that she was getting really behind on. Albert is then asked what his opinion as the Dean of Education for 40 years, that given Kathy's absences, was she going to be able to graduate? And he replies that she would still have been on target to graduate. His impression was that Kathy was interested in paediatrics. So now on to the phone call on the 1st of February 1982. He remembers that it was a woman's voice. The woman stated that she was Kathy Durst and that she would be absent from the clinical duties. He asked her why, and she said she had GI distress, which is gastrointestinal distress, some diarrhea, perhaps a headache. She didn't think it was possible to come to class, and that was the first day of that particular clerkship. He says the call was maybe 5 or 6 minutes at the most. It was a brief phone call. He says that if a student was going to be absent, they would first call the physician in charge of that particular clerkship. But also, in Kathy's case, because they were concerned about absences, Jean Cook wanted to know. Albert had never heard Kathy's voice by phone before, so he isn't able to say if it was definitely Kathy's voice on that phone call that day. But there's more to come with the cross-examination. And as Kathy was a 4th year student, to know exactly who to call, she would know exactly who to call when she was going to be sick and not able to come in. And other than this case, he has never personally ever being contacted by a student to say they were going to be sick and not show up. So, on to the cross-examination. And these aren't getting any easier, by the way. They only get a bit easier when Mr. Chesnoff is doing the cross-examination, but that's only slightly better. And because I've been behind, I've been watching them on replay, so I've been able to speed it up, so I don't have to sit through half an hour's worth of nitpicking at certain detail and trying to pinpoint where people are. So this does make it easier when I can just speed it up. So on that day, Albert was expecting a phone call from Kathy because of the knowledge he had got from Jean Cook. And Albert's reviews of the records, he was very concerned about Kathy missing classes, and Jean told Albert to expect a call from Kathy. So what that translates into is that Jean Cook had passed a message on to Albert saying to expect a phone call from Kathy. So Kathy may have called into Jean Cook's office, but he had already left. So Jean Cook's secretary passed it on to Albert's secretary, and then she passed it on to Albert. So because Jean Cook wasn't there when Kathy called to say she was going to be sick, it got passed to Albert. So that, to me, says there was no special relationship with Albert, and I don't think it was a special relationship with Jean Cook either. He was just trying to keep an eye on her with her absences and things. So now De Guerin is saying that up until the state spoke to Albert, he believed the call was from Kathy. But now the state have put doubt there that there is that possibility that it wasn't her. And it didn't occur to him that it could have been someone else. So this is a good point from the defence. I mean, up until the state spoke to him, he has always believed that it was Kathy that called that day. But because when he spoke to the state back in 2015, he's now got doubt in his mind. So that's what he's now testifying to. So I do agree with the defence going down this route because that there is doubt there. He was interviewed by the people who made the jinx, and in that interview he said he was familiar enough with her voice that he thought he didn't even hesitate. He did think it was her, although he can't remember saying this in this interview with the jinx. He also says that it sounded like a high-pitched woman's voice, but it sounded like her. So I think, the state have lost on this one. He can't say whether it was or wasn't her, and he's always stood by the fact up until this point that it was Kathy. He is asked about the memo Kathy received where it mentioned the unreturned library books, and he says that the person who wrote that seemed to be making more out of it than needed. He can't remember if he told Kathy when she allegedly called him to say she was sick that she was supposed to call the physician in charge of her clerkship. After Kathy disappeared, Bob called the head of the rotation for the ambulatory paediatrics, Dr. Balk, who noted that he had received a phone call from Bob, who was very concerned at Kathy's whereabouts. And the doctor told Bob that Kathy hadn't showed up for the rotation, and Bob wanted a message passed to Albert to contact him at work. We don't know if he did or not. So the redirect. The bottom line is that Albert didn't know what was going on in Kathy's personal life. So there we go. Trying to infer that there's all these special relationships going on when it wasn't really. It was just, the deans just keeping an eye on things. There was nothing more than that. And the only reason why Albert got this phone call is because Jean Cook wasn't in his office at the time. So there we go. More information, but I think the defence have proved that, he didn't know. He stood by the fact that it was Kathy, and now only has doubt that it might not have been her. But, there is still doubt there. But it's a tough one, is this, without actual recorded proof of the phone call, it's hard to know either way. So there we go. I'll be back with more in another video. So until then, bye for now.